The party was already loud by 8 o'clock. Champagne glasses clinked against each other. Soft jazz floated through the marble hallways of the Harrington estate. 40 guests moved through the grand living room in silk dresses and tailored suits, laughing at things that weren't funny, smiling at people they didn't like. It was an engagement party, and it should have been one of the happiest nights of the year. But in the corner of that glittering room, a little girl was crying. She wasn't crying loudly. She wasn't throwing a fit. She was standing near the bottom of the staircase, her tiny hands pressed flat against the wall, her dark eyes wet and wide. Her bottom lip trembling so hard it looked like it might never stop. She was 3 years old. Her name was Lily. She had curly hair that her mother had twisted into 2 small puffs that morning. She wore a plain white dress, clean, simple, pressed with care, and small brown shoes that had been polished until they caught the light. She had wandered in from the kitchen hallway. She had no idea she wasn't supposed to be there. And that was the moment everything changed. Because across that room, standing at the center of a group of admirers, was Vanessa Cole. Vanessa was 30 years old. She had the kind of face that photographers loved. Sharp cheekbones, clear green eyes, a practiced smile that looked genuine until you studied it for too long. She wore a red dress that had cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Her dark hair was pinned up in a way that said she'd spent hours pretending she hadn't tried at all. She was the fiancée of Marcus Harrington. And she saw Lily the moment the little girl walked in. The conversation around Vanessa slowed. A few guests turned to look. Someone let out a small, polite laugh, the kind you make when you're not sure if something is funny or just uncomfortable. Vanessa looked at Lily the way a person looks at a bug that has wandered onto their dining table. Then she smiled. It was the smile that should have warned everyone. "Oh, look at that," she said, loud enough for the nearest 15 people to hear. She tilted her glass in Lily's direction. The maid's little accident wandered in from the kitchen. Silence spread through that corner of the room like water through cloth. Lily didn't understand the word accident, but she understood the tone. Children always understand the tone. She looked up at Vanessa with those wide, wet eyes, and she took one small step backward. Vanessa stepped toward her. "You're not supposed to be in here, little girl." Her voice was sweet the way poison is sweet, coated in something pleasant on top, deadly underneath. "This is a party for grown-ups. People with money. People who belong here." She crouched down to Lily's level, and then she said it. She looked at Lily's little hands, still pressed against the wall, and she wrinkled her nose. "You're dirty," she whispered. "You're dirty, just like your mother." The room heard it. Every single person in that corner of the room heard it. Some of them looked away. Some of them studied their drinks. One woman, older in a navy dress, pressed her lips together and said nothing. Lily didn't cry louder. She didn't run. She just looked at Vanessa with those big dark eyes, and she whispered back, so softly that only the people closest could hear. She whispered, "She called me dirty." Not to anyone in particular. Just to the air. Just to the world. And the world heard her. Marcus Harrington heard her. He was standing 12 feet away, near the fireplace, a glass of bourbon in his hand, deep in conversation with his business partner. He had his back turned. He hadn't seen any of it happen. But he heard those 3 words float across the room. "He called me dirty." He turned around slowly. He saw Lily standing against the wall, her face wet, her tiny body rigid with the particular stillness of a child who has learned, far too early, not to make a scene. He saw Vanessa rising back to her full height, smoothing her dress, turning back to her admirers with that practiced smile already returning to her face. And Marcus Harrington, 42 years old, one of the wealthiest men in the state, a man who had built his fortune on reading people and reading rooms, felt something happen inside his chest. Something cold. Something he had never felt toward Vanessa before. He didn't say anything. Not yet. He just set his glass down on the mantelpiece. very quietly, very carefully. And he watched his fiancée laugh at something someone said. And he thought about a 3-year-old girl who hadn't asked to be born into any of this. And he thought about the word dirty, and he felt that cold thing spread. Let's go back. Go back 3 months, to the morning Rosa Mendez first walked through the service entrance of the Harrington estate carrying a mop, a bucket, and a little girl she had no one to leave at home. Rosa was 28 years old. She had spent the last 4 years of her life making herself as invisible as possible, because invisible was safe. Invisible meant you kept your job. Invisible meant you got paid. Invisible meant your daughter kept eating. Lily's father had left before Lily could walk. There was no drama in that sentence. It was just the truth, plain and flat, the way hard truths usually are. Rosa had moved from city to city, following cleaning work, taking what she could get, building no roots because roots cost money she didn't have. When the position at the Harrington estate opened up, full-time, live-in, with a small room in the staff quarters where a child could sleep, she applied the same day she saw it. She almost didn't get the call back. The estate manager, a stiff-backed woman named Mrs. Fowler, had concerns. Child, she said. In the staff quarters. It's not exactly standard. But Marcus Harrington had seen Rosa's application on his desk one afternoon, and something in the clean simplicity of it. No complaints from previous employers, 5 years of steady work, 1 listed dependent, a 3-year-old daughter, had made him say, give her a chance. He didn't know why he'd said it. He didn't think about it again. Not then. The estate was enormous. 6 bedrooms, 4 reception rooms, a library, a dining room that seated 24, a kitchen that could have housed a small restaurant, and grounds that stretched 3 acres in every direction. Marcus had inherited the house from his father and had never seriously considered selling it, even though he spent most of his time in the city. It was his anchor, his history, his one piece of the world that still felt, in some oblique way, like it belonged to him personally rather than to Harrington Industries. He came home on weekends mostly. Sometimes during the week, if the city exhausted him. He was that kind of wealthy, the kind that didn't talk about it, didn't perform it, didn't need to. His suits were good but not flashy. His car was expensive but black. He had the particular quietness of a man who had spent decades learning to watch a room rather than fill it. Vanessa had been in his life for 2 years. She was beautiful. She was charming. She was brilliant at social situations in a way Marcus never was. She made people feel seen, made conversation look effortless, laughed at exactly the right moments. She had come from money too, though less of it than Marcus, and she carried herself with a particular confidence of someone who had spent her whole life being the most impressive person in most rooms. Marcus thought he loved her. He was comfortable with her. He trusted her. She made sense in the context of his life. The parties, the galas, the board dinners where a partner who could hold her own was worth more than most people understood. He proposed in January. She said yes before he'd finished the sentence. The engagement party was her idea. Big one. 70 invitations, catered, jazz band, champagne by the case. Marcus had agreed because Vanessa wanted it, and he'd grown accustomed to agreeing when the thing she wanted didn't cost him anything he couldn't spare. He had not yet learned the cost of overlooking the small things. Rosa and Lily had been at the estate for 8 weeks before the party. In those 8 weeks, Rosa had learned every inch of the house. She learned which floors creaked in the morning. She learned that Mr. Harrington liked his coffee black and early, left in a thermos on the kitchen counter for when he came downstairs at 6. She learned that Mrs. Fowler was strict but fair, and that the gardener, an old man named Bert, would slip Lily a biscuit every morning without being asked. Lily had learned things too. She had learned that the library smelled like old paper and that she liked it. She had learned that the fountain in the east garden made a sound like music when the wind hit it a certain way. She had learned that Mr. Harrington, when he passed through the kitchen in the morning and found her sitting at the corner of the table with her cup of warm milk, would pause every single time and say good morning. Not to her mother. To her. Specifically to her. He would look right at her, that tall, quiet man with the grays starting at his temples, and he would say, "Good morning, Lily," as if she were a person who deserved a good morning. Which she was. She absolutely was. But 3-year-olds notice when people see them. Really see them. And Lily noticed Marcus. She started saving him things. Small things. A smooth pebble she found near the fountain. A leaf that had turned completely red. A drawing she made of what she said was a horse but looked more like a rectangle with legs. She would leave them outside his study door. He found them every time. And every time the next morning he would come into the kitchen and say, "I found something outside my door, Lily. Was that for me?" And she would hide her face in her cup and nod. And he would say thank you with the same gravity he used when signing contracts. Rosa watched all of this from a careful distance. She had learned by 30 not to let herself hope too much. Hope was a currency she couldn't afford to waste. But she watched Marcus Harrington say good morning to her daughter every single day. And she filed it away in the place where she kept the things that mattered. Vanessa saw it differently. Vanessa visited the estate every weekend. She came on Friday evenings and left Sunday afternoons. And she treated the Harrington estate the way a person treats a hotel they already consider their own. She rearranged things. She made requests of Mrs. Fowler that were really just barely softened commands. She looked at Rosa with the particular expression of someone who has decided that another person is furniture. Present, functional, essentially invisible. She never said good morning to Lily. Not once in 8 weeks. She walked past her. Through her. Around her. As if a 3-year-old girl with puff braids and warm milk wasn't sitting right there in the corner of the kitchen, watching the world with those enormous dark eyes. This was the world the engagement party arrived into. It started quietly, the way all the dangerous things do. The first weekend after Rosa and Lily arrived, Vanessa had simply let her gaze rest on Rosa for a half-second too long when Rosa brought the morning tray into the sitting room. Nothing you could name. Nothing you could complain about. Just a look that said, "I see what you are. I see where you belong. Don't forget it." Rosa didn't forget it. She held the tray steadily. She said, "Your coffee, Miss Cole." And she left the room without looking back. The second weekend, Vanessa had a small complaint for Mrs. Fowler. The east corridor hadn't been polished properly. She'd noticed a smear near the window. She wanted it corrected. Mrs. Fowler noted it, checked the corridor herself. The floor was, by any reasonable assessment, immaculate, and said she would speak to the staff. She didn't say which staff member she'd address. She knew Vanessa knew. They both knew. Rosa polished the east corridor again that afternoon. On her hands and knees. With Lily sitting against the wall nearby, quietly working on a drawing, occasionally holding up a crayon and saying the color out loud because she was learning her colors and she wanted witnesses to her progress. "Orange," Lily said, holding up a crayon. "That's right," Rosa said quietly, not looking up from the floor. "Mama, why are you doing it again? You did it this morning." "Because I want it to be perfect, baby." Lily thought about this. Was it not perfect before? Rosa sat back on her heels for a moment. She looked at her daughter. She thought about 32 things she couldn't say to a 3-year-old. "It's always good to do your best twice," she said. Lily accepted this with the complete confidence of someone who trusts their mother completely. She went back to her drawing. The third weekend, Vanessa asked that Lily not be in the common areas during daylight hours when guests were expected. It wasn't a rule exactly. She framed it as a preference. She told Mrs. Fowler that the child was underfoot, and that it didn't look right. Mrs. Fowler was uncomfortable. She came to Rosa privately and explained the situation with the diplomatic efficiency of a woman who had spent 20 years managing other people's awkward requests. Rosa listened without expression. "Of course," she said. She began keeping Lily in the staff quarters during Vanessa's visits. She brought her breakfast on a tray. She arranged small activities, coloring, building things from wooden blocks, practicing letters on a small chalkboard. She made it an adventure, the way good mothers make everything an adventure when the truth is too sharp for small ears. Lily didn't complain. She was 3. She didn't know what was being done. But she noticed that when Miss Vanessa was at the house, she didn't get to see the fountain. And she noticed that when Miss Vanessa wasn't there, Mr. Harrington sometimes stopped in the hallway when he saw her and asked what she was drawing. She began to understand, in the wordless way of very young children, that there were 2 different houses. The house when it was just them, and the house when Miss Vanessa came. She liked the first house better. The 4th weekend brought something new. Vanessa began making comments in front of Marcus. Small ones. Deniable ones. The kind that someone could defend as just harmless observations if they were ever called out. Which they wouldn't be, because Vanessa was very good at understanding exactly how far she could push before someone pushed back. "I think the kitchen smells a bit off today," she said at dinner, with Marcus at the other end of the table. "I wonder if Mrs. Fowler should remind the new girl about hygiene." Marcus looked up. "Rosa, the maid with the child, said the way you might refer to a parking meter. Functional. Replaceable. Not worth naming properly." "Rosa keeps an immaculate kitchen," Marcus said mildly. "Of course." Vanessa smiled. "I'm sure it's nothing." She picked up her fork. The subject closed. But it didn't close. Not for Rosa, who found out about the comment through Mrs. Fowler's careful, apologetic delivery the following morning. Not for Marcus, who filed the comment away without quite knowing why. It sat in some back room of his mind, unexamined, the way these things do until there are enough of them to look at all at once. Then came the incident with the flowers. There was a vase of white roses in the hallway near the east staircase. Rosa polished around it every morning. One Tuesday the vase was knocked. No one saw how, no one admitted to anything, and water spread across the table and the floor and soaked into the stack of letters waiting to be posted. Mrs. Fowler arrived to find Rosa already on her knees cleaning it up. Vanessa appeared from the staircase a moment later. She looked at the water. She looked at Rosa. She looked at the ruined letters, which included a handwritten note Vanessa had written to her event planner. "This is unacceptable," Vanessa said. Her voice was cold and clear as January air. "This is basic competence. Basic responsibility. If she can't manage a vase without flooding the hallway, what exactly is she doing here?" Rosa said nothing. She kept wiping. "I'm speaking to you," Vanessa said. "I understand, Miss Cole," Rosa said quietly. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Sorry doesn't fix my letter." "No, doesn't. I'll write Mrs. Fowler a note about having it reposted." Vanessa stared at her for a moment. She was looking for something, a crack, an excuse, an edge she could use. Rosa gave her nothing. Just the clean, quiet dignity of a woman who has decided that this particular war will not be fought on this particular battlefield. Vanessa left without saying anything else. Rosa finished cleaning the floor. But the following Friday, when Vanessa arrived for the weekend, she had a conversation with Marcus in the study that Rosa didn't hear but Mrs. Fowler did, because sound traveled through the East Wing in ways that had surprised every staff member who'd ever worked there. Vanessa told Marcus that she was concerned about the standard of housekeeping. She told him she thought the maid, not Rosa, just the maid, as if the name were below the level of necessary information, might not be a good fit. She said it was nothing personal. Of course it wasn't personal. These things never were. She said she thought it might be better for everyone if they found someone without a child in tow, someone who could dedicate themselves fully to the work, someone who wasn't. And here she smiled, the practiced gentle smile, distracted. Marcus didn't say yes. But he didn't say no either. He said he'd think about it. And that was when Mrs. Fowler, who had worked in this house for 11 years and prided herself on staying out of personal matters, went to Rosa's room that evening and sat down and told her to be careful. Rosa listened. She thanked Mrs. Fowler. She put Lily to bed. And then she sat in the dark for a long time, thinking about where she would go if she had to go, and how many weeks of pay she had saved, and whether it was enough. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. Marcus Harrington was not a stupid man. He had spent 20 years building a company from a single inherited factory into an empire that stretched across 4 industries. He had made decisions that kept thousands of people employed. He had walked into rooms full of brilliant, aggressive, sometimes dishonest people and learned to read them the way other men read weather. But love, or what he thought was love, had made him lazy. Not lazy in the obvious ways. He still worked hard. He still watched his board closely. He still managed, with the particular efficiency of the self-disciplined, to see through most of the performances that crossed his desk. He just didn't watch Vanessa. Not really. Not the way you watch someone when you need to know who they are rather than who they've decided to be for you. The awakening was slow. It started the morning after Vanessa had complained about Rosa to Mrs. Fowler. The complaint about hygiene that had been delivered as an observation, not an accusation, because Vanessa understood exactly how to say something without saying it. Mrs. Fowler had mentioned it to Marcus not as a complaint but as an update. In the careful way she always kept him informed about matters that affected the household. Marcus had listened. Then he'd gone to the kitchen and found Rosa cleaning the stovetop with the same focused, quiet efficiency she brought to every task he had ever observed. Lily was sitting at the corner of the table with a cup of warm milk, carefully tearing small pieces of bread into exact squares, for reasons that were entirely her own. Marcus had said good morning. Lily had said good morning back very seriously, and then held up a square of bread as if presenting evidence. Marcus had looked at the square of bread. He had looked at Lily. He had looked at Rosa, who had glanced at him briefly and then gone back to the stovetop. He thought about the word hygiene. He looked at the immaculate kitchen. He looked at Rosa's clean uniform. He looked at Lily's clean face and clean dress and careful squares of bread. He said nothing. He took his coffee from the thermos. He went to his study. But he thought about it. The second moment came a week later. He came home on a Wednesday. Unexpected, earlier than usual, a meeting cancelled at the last minute. He came through the front door and heard, from the direction of the east corridor, Vanessa's voice. She was on the phone. He wasn't trying to listen. He was just walking to the staircase. He heard her say, "No, I know. The situation with the maid is getting sorted. Marcus just needs a little more time to see it my way. He always does eventually." He stopped walking. He stood still in the hallway for a long moment. Then he continued to the staircase. He didn't say anything to Vanessa that evening. He thought about whether he'd misunderstood. He was fair that way. He gave people room to be misunderstood before he concluded anything. He'd been wrong before about what he'd overheard. Context mattered. But the sentence stayed with him. He always does eventually. The third moment came from Lily. It was a Saturday morning, 3 weeks before the engagement party. Marcus came down early, before Vanessa was awake, before most of the house was awake, and found Lily sitting in the hallway outside the kitchen, not inside it. She was sitting with her back against the wall and her knees pulled up, quiet in the particular way of children who are waiting for permission to exist. He stopped. "What are you doing out here, Lily?" She looked up at him. "Mama said I have to wait." "Wait for what?" "For when it's okay." He didn't understand at first. Then slowly he did. She wasn't allowed in the common areas. Not when Vanessa was in the house. He stood there for a moment. He said, "You can come into the kitchen, Lily. I'll make you some warm milk." She looked uncertain. "Is it okay?" "Yes," he said. "It's okay." She got up and followed him, holding 2 fingers of his hand because her hand was too small to hold more. And he made her warm milk and they sat at the table together in the early quiet, and she showed him a drawing she'd been working on, which she said was a picture of the fountain. It looked like a circle with lines coming out of it. It looked like the most precise representation of joy he had seen in 20 years. He kept it. He put it in his desk drawer. He thought about a little girl sitting in a hallway waiting for permission to exist. The fourth moment came from something he saw himself. A Tuesday afternoon, a week before the party. He was walking through the east wing and he passed the utility room and the door was slightly open and he heard voices. He heard Vanessa's voice. "If you aren't able to maintain a basic level of professional distance, I'm going to have to speak to Marcus again." He heard nothing in response. Rosa's silence. "I need you to understand something," Vanessa continued. "This house is going to be mine soon. Everything in it. Everyone in it works for me. And I need people who understand that." Still silence. "Are we clear?" Beep. Rosa's voice quiet and even. "Yes, Miss Cole." Vanessa's footsteps moved toward the door. Marcus stepped back from the doorway before she came through. He stood in the corridor and breathed slowly for a moment. "This house is going to be mine soon. Everyone in it works for me." He walked back to his study. He sat at his desk. He thought about 2 years of evenings and weekends and conversations and laughter. He thought about how well he knew Vanessa, or how well he thought he did. He thought about the gap between those two things, and how wide it had always been, and how he hadn't let himself look at it directly. He opened his desk drawer. He looked at the drawing of the fountain, the circle with lines coming out of it. He closed the drawer again. He picked up his phone and called his attorney. Not about anything specific. Just to touch base, he said. Just to check in. His attorney, who had known him for 15 years, noted that he sounded like a man who was thinking about something he wasn't ready to say yet. She was right. He wasn't ready yet. The party was in 6 days. The night of the party arrived with the particular brightness of an event that has been planned too carefully. The caterers arrived at 4. The jazz quartet arrived at 5. The florist spent 2 hours arranging white lilies and deep red roses. Vanessa had chosen the flowers, and the red roses were magnificent, climbing up every surface in the grand room like something trying to take over. Rosa worked that evening without stopping. She carried trays, she cleared glasses. She moved through the crowded rooms with a practiced invisibility she had perfected over years of working in houses that were not hers. She had arranged for Lily to stay in the staff quarters. She had set up a small game on the little table, left a cup of warm milk, told Lily that this was a special evening and Mama had to work very hard but she would check in every hour. Lily had accepted this with the serious nod of someone who understands duty. But 3-year-olds don't always stay where they're put. At 8:15, Lily woke up from a small nap she hadn't intended to take and looked at the empty room and decided she wanted her mother. She was good at navigating the staff corridors. She had learned them over 2 months of living here. She came through the kitchen hallway. She pushed through the door. And she walked into the party. You already know what happened next. But what you don't know is everything that happened after. Vanessa's words, "You're dirty, just like your mother," floated across the room and reached Marcus Harrington's ears and landed there like something that could not be undone. He turned around. He saw Lily. He saw her face, the wet eyes, the trembling lip, the stillness. He saw Vanessa, already turning back to her audience, smile restored, moving forward. And he felt the cold thing in his chest expand until it filled his entire ribcage. He crossed the room. Not quickly. Not dramatically. He moved with the calm deliberateness of a man who has made a decision that cannot be unmade. He walked to Lily first. He crouched down to her level the way Vanessa had done, but differently. Completely differently. He looked at her face. He looked at her wet eyes. He took both her small hands in his and held them gently. "Lily," he said quietly. She looked at him. Her lip was still trembling. "You're not dirty," he said. "You are not dirty. Do you hear me?" She blinked. "You are the cleanest, most wonderful person in this entire room," he said. And he meant it with every quiet piece of himself. "I need to go speak to someone. But I'm going to come right back, and Mrs. Fowler is going to bring you to your mama. Okay. She looked at him for a long moment. She nodded. He straightened up. He looked across the room at Vanessa. She hadn't seen him with Lily. She was mid-laugh, her head tilted back, champagne glass raised, entirely in her element, the center of the celebration of her own engagement, radiating beauty and ease and the particular confidence of someone who believes the night is going exactly as planned. Marcus walked toward her. The guests nearest to him moved slightly without knowing why. Just the particular gravity of a man who is absolutely certain of what he's about to do. He stopped 3 feet from Vanessa. She turned when she sensed him there, and her face opened into a smile. Marcus, there you are. I was just telling David about Vanessa. His voice was calm. Completely calm. The kind of calm that has weight to it. He stopped. The conversation around them stopped. I need to speak to you, he said. Right now. Darling, we're in the middle of. I know. He looked at her for a moment. I'm asking you to step aside with me for a moment. Something shifted in her eyes. She read his face. She was good at reading faces. She had read his face many times over 2 years and always found what she expected. Patience, affection, willingness. She didn't find those things now. She found something she had never prepared for. She found a man who had stopped overlooking things. Of course, she said smoothly, and her smile stayed perfectly in place because she was very good and very practiced and she had managed more difficult situations than this. They stepped away from the group. They moved to a space near the window, still visible to the room. Marcus chose this deliberately. This was not going to be a private conversation. Not because he wanted an audience, but because certain things need to be said in the light. What happened with Lily, he said. The smile didn't waver. The maid's child wandered in. I simply redirected her. I heard what you said to her. Was. A fraction of a second, barely visible, but Marcus caught it. I was just explaining that the party was for adults. You told her she was dirty. Vanessa's eyes didn't change, but something behind them shifted. I think you may have misheard. I didn't mishear. His voice was still completely calm. I heard you. At least 8 other people heard you. You looked at a 3-year-old child and told her she was dirty. Like her mother. Vanessa drew a breath through her nose. Marcus. Children need clear direction. She doesn't belong in. This is my house, Vanessa. The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. This is my house. Lily and her mother live here because I invited them here. Rosa works here with distinction. She has worked here every day with more integrity than I have seen from most adults in my professional life. He paused. And you have spent 6 weeks undermining her, isolating her child, making complaints designed to get her removed. And tonight you crouched down in front of a 3-year-old girl at a party meant to celebrate us and called her dirty. Vanessa was silent. This was new. She was almost never silent. I've watched you for 2 years, Marcus said. I thought I knew who you were. I'm standing here right now understanding that I was watching a performance. That's not fair. Her voice was very controlled. That's not who I am. I was overwhelmed this evening. I was stressed about the party. I reacted badly. I'll apologize to the child. You won't, Marcus said quietly. You stop. You won't approach Lily again. You won't speak to Rosa again. Because you won't be in this house again after tonight. The room had gone very quiet. Not silent. The jazz still played softly in the background. A few conversations continued at the far end of the room, but in their immediate vicinity, in the radius of people close enough to see their faces without needing to hear every word, there was a complete and total stillness. Vanessa looked at him. For the first time in 2 years, Marcus saw the performance slip. Not dramatically. Not a scene. Vanessa was too controlled for that. But the practiced ease went out of her face, and what was underneath it was something he recognized. He had seen it in boardrooms, in negotiations, in the faces of people who have just realized that the leverage they assumed they had no longer exists. "Marcus," she said. Her voice was quiet, private. She stepped slightly closer. "Let's not do this here. Let's be reasonable. Let's talk about this properly." "I've been talking to you properly for 6 weeks," he said. "Or I was. Properly and without seeing what was right in front of me." He paused. "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry it took a 3-year-old's tears to make me look." He looked at her for one long moment. Then he looked away. He looked across the room and found Mrs. Fowler, who was standing near the kitchen doorway with the careful neutrality of a woman who has witnessed this from a distance and has already understood everything. "Mrs. Fowler," he said at a volume that carried, "would you make sure Miss Cole's car is brought around? She'll be leaving this evening." Mrs. Fowler nodded. "Of course, Mr. Harrington." Vanessa stood very still. The ring was on her left hand. Red roses climbed every surface around her. The jazz played something slow and sweet. She looked at Marcus one final time. Then she put her glass down on the nearest surface very precisely, the way someone puts something down when they are refusing to throw it. She walked to the staircase. She walked up the stairs. She didn't look back. The guests began to leave not long after. Some of them offered Marcus quiet words. A hand on the shoulder, a meaningful look, the kind of support that doesn't require language because language would make it awkward. A few of them, he noticed, looked relieved, as if they had been holding something in all evening and had just been given permission to put it down. The older woman in the navy dress, the one who had pressed her lips together and said nothing when Lily stood against the wall, stopped near the door. She looked at Marcus. "You did the right thing," she said simply. He nodded. He didn't say anything. He was already thinking about Lily. The caterers cleared up quietly. The florist's assistant came back for the spare arrangements. The jazz quartet packed their instruments and left with the careful efficiency of professionals who had learned never to acknowledge what they witnessed at private events. The red roses stayed, climbing the walls in the empty room, beautiful and entirely indifferent. By 10 o'clock, the house was quiet. Marcus went to the kitchen. Rosa was there. She was standing at the counter with a cup of tea held in both hands, and when he walked in she set it down immediately and straightened, the automatic posture of someone who has trained themselves never to be caught resting. "Sit down," he said quietly. "Please." She hesitated. "Rosa, sit down." She sat at the corner of the table. Her corner. The one she always chose. He sat across from her. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just looked at his hands. "I owe you an apology," he said. She looked up. She had not expected that. "I saw what was happening. Not all of it, not as clearly as I should have. But I saw enough over these past weeks to know that something was wrong. And I didn't act. I told myself I needed more information. I told myself I needed to be certain." He paused. "What I needed was to stop treating your discomfort as something less urgent than my convenience." Rosa looked at him for a long moment. "You don't owe me an apology, Mr. Harrington." "I think I do. You came when it mattered," she said. And her voice was steady, the way the voices of people who have managed hard things for a long time tend to be steady. "That's what I'll remember." He nodded. "How is Lily?" he asked. "Sleeping." Small pause. "She doesn't fully understand what happened. She knows something happened. But she was asleep before 9. Rosa looked at her tea. "She does understand that you told her she wasn't dirty. I think that's what she'll carry from tonight." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "She's going to be remarkable," he said. "That child." Rosa looked up. Something in her face opened. Briefly, carefully, the way very private people allow things to show when they're too tired to be guarded. "She already is," she said. They sat in the kitchen for a while longer. They didn't say much else. They didn't need to. Vanessa Cole left the Harrington estate that night with 2 suitcases and without a word to anyone except Mrs. Fowler, to whom she said, with controlled precision, that she expected her remaining personal items to be boxed and sent to her city address. Mrs. Fowler said of course. Vanessa's car pulled through the front gate at 10:43. She did not look back at the house. She was a controlled woman. Practical woman. She did not spend time on things that couldn't be repaired. But in the weeks that followed, the story got around, as stories always do, in the particular world they inhabited. Few guests mentioned it. Someone who had been at the party mentioned it to someone else. By the time it reached the people who mattered in those social circles, it had the clear shape of a thing that couldn't be softened. She had mocked a 3-year-old girl in front of 40 people. She had called a child dirty. And Marcus Harrington, quiet, steady Marcus Harrington, who had never made a scene in his adult life, had asked her to leave in front of all of them. The invitations she received after that were different. Fewer of them. Different quality. The kind you get when the room has quietly recalibrated what you are worth. She didn't understand this for a long time. That was, perhaps, the most complete part of her downfall. Not that people stopped trusting her, but that she spent so long looking for someone else to blame that she never looked at the moment in the east corner of that grand room when she crouched down to a child's level and said something that couldn't be taken back, and she made the most basic miscalculation available to people who use others as instruments. She forgot that children remember. She forgot that rooms remember. She forgot that a man who has spent decades watching people read things other people miss. 3 weeks after the party, on a Sunday morning, Marcus came downstairs and found Lily in the kitchen. She was sitting at the corner of the table with her cup of warm milk. She had a piece of paper in front of her and 3 crayons arranged in order of size. Something she did now, arranging things in order of size, because she had recently become interested in how things related to each other. She was drawing something. Marcus made his coffee. He sat across from her. "Good morning, Lily." "Good morning, Mr. Harrington." Very serious. Her morning voice always had a weight to it, as if she had been awake for hours considering important things. "What are you drawing?" She held it up. It was a house. A large house, drawn the way children draw houses. Square body, triangle roof, rectangle door, squares for windows. Beside the house she had drawn 3 figures. The tall one was clearly Marcus. She had given him straight lines for legs and what appeared to be a briefcase. The medium one was Rosa. The small one was herself, identifiable by the 2 circles on top of her head that represented her puff braids. They were standing in front of the house. All 3 of them. Marcus looked at the drawing for a long time. "Is this our house?" he said. She looked at him with those dark, serious eyes. "Yes," she said, as if this were entirely obvious. He took the drawing carefully from her hands. He looked at it. 3 figures in front of a house. The tall one, the medium one, the small one with the 2 circles on top of her head. "Can I keep this one?" he said. She considered him. She picked up a crayon. She pointed at the drawing. "I have to write my name on it first," she said. "Of course," he said. She bent over the paper, tongue pressed between her teeth in concentration, and carefully, in the large, uneven letters of someone learning, she wrote, "Lily." She slid it back across the table to him. He picked it up. He held it the way you hold things that cost nothing and are worth everything. "Thank you, Lily," he said. She nodded, satisfied with this outcome, and went back to her warm milk. Rosa appeared in the kitchen doorway. She saw her daughter. She saw Marcus with the drawing in his hands. She saw the expression on his face, unguarded, in the particular way that early mornings and the company of honest people make men unguarded. She said nothing. She went to the counter. She began the morning. The kitchen was warm and quiet. Outside, the East Garden fountain made it sound like music. Lily hummed something to herself. No particular song, just notes arranged in the order she liked them. And the house was exactly what it should have been all along. A place where everyone inside it was allowed to belong. Some people walk into a room and make it smaller. They do it with a word. Look. A casual cruelty aimed at the smallest person in the space. They believe this makes them larger. Doesn't. It only reveals what they are. And in rooms full of watching eyes, that revelation is permanent. Lily was 3 years old. She didn't need to be rescued. She just needed one person to look at her and tell her the truth. The truth was simple. She was not dirty. She was the reason the whole story happened. She was the heart of it. She always had been.